After losing the court case to my husband, I walked into the clinic in despair, carrying my unborn twins. But just as my hand touched the door, an old woman's voice behind me changed everything. "Don't go in there, honey," she said, her voice raspy and low, cutting through the rain that had begun to fall more steadily. I froze. The cold seeped into my bones, but it wasn't from the rain. It was the voice that gripped me, the certainty in it. The way it seemed to know something I hadn't said aloud to anyone, not even myself. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my chest, and saw her, an elderly woman sitting on the concrete ledge by the entrance. Her clothes were layered and worn, her hair gray and tangled beneath a hood. She was holding a paper cup, long emptied of whatever warmth it had once held. But it was her eyes that caught me, sharp and alert despite the exhaustion in her face. "The judge wasn't fair to you," she murmured, almost too softly for me to hear, but I caught every word. "Someone paid him. You know that?" A chill ran through me, not from the damp air, but from the sudden, terrifying clarity of her words. I hadn't told anyone. Not even my lawyer, or Monica, or my mother. No one knew the gnawing suspicion I had, that the ruling had been rigged. The thought had been in the back of my mind. A whisper in the quietest moments, but I had never dared to speak it. And yet here she was, telling me something I had feared for weeks. I took a hesitant step toward her, but before I could speak, she nodded once, as if she already knew what I would ask. "You're right," she said, and there was no doubt in her voice. "The fix is in." My breath caught. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. I wasn't sure if it was fear or disbelief that kept me silent. But before I could gather my thoughts, she stood up, surprisingly fast for someone her age, and walked away, disappearing into the rain as quickly as she had appeared. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, rain falling softly on my coat, my breath shaky, my heart racing. The clinic door loomed in front of me, but something had shifted inside me. I wasn't just standing outside in the cold anymore. I wasn't just a woman defeated by the system, ready to give up. I couldn't go in there. I couldn't do it. I turned away, not knowing where I was going, but certain that I wasn't walking down the path that had seemed like my only option just moments before. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a direction. But I had a feeling, a spark of something that felt like a beginning instead of an ending. Something small, fragile, but stubborn, was pushing through the walls I had built around myself. The rain followed me as I walked through the streets of Portland. The city quiet and cold around me, my mind spinning. The feeling didn't fade. It only grew stronger, as though the weight of everything that had happened, the courtroom, Daniel's smug victory, my lawyer's cowardice, was beginning to shift. A crack had formed, too, and the truth that had been buried deep inside me was starting to break through. For the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. I couldn't say how or why, but I knew that somehow, somewhere, something was about to change. And I couldn't go back to the life I had left behind. I took a deep breath as I stood outside the clinic, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. The early morning rain had started again, a fine mist that blurred the street lights and made everything feel distant and dreamlike. Portland's streets were quiet, the city still half asleep, but I could feel the weight of it all on my shoulders. The quietness didn't soothe me, it just reminded me of the emptiness I felt inside. The past few days had been a blur of paperwork, courtrooms, and faces that I didn't know or trust. The courtroom still haunted me. I could hear the judge's voice, cold and dismissive, telling me that I wasn't fit to raise my own children, that Daniel had more money, more power, more influence, and my lawyer, God, my lawyer, he hadn't even fought. He had let the case slip through his fingers, as if he had already given up before the first word was spoken. I remembered the way he'd shrunk in his seat when Daniel's attorney launched into their aggressive, polished argument. The way the judge barely looked at me, as if my presence didn't matter. I wanted to scream then. To yell that I wasn't just some trophy for Daniel to claim, that I was their mother, that I had a right to protect my children. But nothing I said had mattered. Here I was, standing outside this clinic, on the verge of making a decision that felt just as wrong as everything that had led me here. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to walk through that door. But I felt trapped, like there was no way out. Terminating this pregnancy would give me control again, a small piece of control in a life that had been taken from me. But it didn't feel right. My twins were growing inside me, small and vulnerable, and the thought of letting go of them made my stomach churn. I lifted my hand to the door, my fingers trembling, but before I could touch the handle, I heard the voice. "Don't go in there, honey." The words were low, rasping, and seemed to slice through the quiet rain. I froze, my heart skipping in my chest. I turned, slowly my eyes scanning the street for the source of the voice. And then I saw her. An elderly woman hunched over, sitting on the concrete ledge near the entrance. Her clothes were worn, layers of fabric wrapped tightly around her, and her hair was a tangled mess beneath a hood. She held a paper cup in her hands, long since emptied of any warmth. But it was her eyes that caught me, sharp and clear, staring at me with an intensity that made my chest tighten. She nodded once, her gaze unwavering. "The judge wasn't fair to you," she continued, her voice carrying a strange certainty, as if she already knew everything that had happened. "Someone paid him. You know that." I blinked, shocked by the words that fell from her lips. I had thought it, wondered it, even, but hearing it spoken aloud by a stranger felt like a slap across my face. I hadn't told anyone about my suspicions, not even Monica. The only person who had stood by me through this entire nightmare. And yet this woman, this stranger. I took a step toward her, my heart racing, my mind spinning. What was she talking about? But before I could speak, she stood up, moving quickly despite her age, and turned, walking away into the mist. I reached out, wanting to ask more, to demand answers, but she was already gone, swallowed by the rain. I stood there, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts, feeling the weight of her words settle heavily in my chest. The rain continued to fall, soft and steady, but now it felt like a shroud, a cold reminder of everything I had lost, and everything I still stood to lose. But something had changed. I wasn't just standing here anymore, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. I had a choice to make. I didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in days, I felt like I had a direction. I turned away from the clinic, my feet moving without thinking. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew that I couldn't take that step inside. Not yet. Not without understanding what had really happened to me. What had happened to my family. As I walked, the rain followed me. The soft patter of droplets on the sidewalk, a steady reminder that I wasn't walking this path alone. Something was stirring inside me, something small, fragile, but growing stronger. A sense of defiance. A spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't powerless after all. I wasn't sure what the next step would be, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the courage to take it. I pulled my coat tighter around me as I walked down the street, the cold rain soaking through the fabric. But it didn't matter. It wasn't the rain that made me shiver. It was the weight of everything that had happened, everything I was facing. The words of that woman, the stranger who had known things no one else did, echoed in my mind. "Someone paid him," she had said. "The judge wasn't fair to you." I didn't know if I believed her. It was absurd, wasn't it? A homeless woman telling me that my entire life had been manipulated. But there was something about the way she spoke, the certainty in her voice, that made me pause. It was as if she could see, right through the walls I had built around myself. It was unsettling, and yet, it felt like the first piece of truth I'd heard in a long time. I couldn't keep walking aimlessly, lost in the rain. I needed to do something. Anything. I couldn't let this go. But where to start? The thought of calling Monica crossed my mind. Monica Fields had been my friend in college. She was tough, always had a sharp mind, and she never backed down from a fight. But I hadn't spoken to her in years, not since life had sent us in different directions. I had tried to make it on my own, burying everything that had happened, convincing myself that I could handle it. But now, standing here in the rain, I knew I couldn't do this alone anymore. I reached into my pocket, fumbling for my phone, my fingers cold and stiff. My breath came in shallow bursts as I scrolled through my contacts. There it was, Monica's name. I hesitated for a moment, the fear of reaching out after so long weighing on me. But then, just as quickly, that small spark of defiance I had felt earlier pushed me forward. I pressed the call button and waited, my heart pounding. It rang twice before she answered, her voice instantly familiar, though it had softened with age. Hannah, hey, is everything okay? Her voice was calm, but I could hear the underlying concern. No. I whispered. I need to talk to you. It's about the case, and everything that's been happening. I don't know what to do anymore. There was a brief silence on the other end. Monica knew me well enough to understand when something was wrong. Where are you? She asked. Home? I replied, feeling the weight of her unspoken question hanging in the air. Can you come over? I'll be there in 30 minutes, she said without hesitation. Hang in there, okay. The relief that washed over me was almost immediate. I wasn't alone in this. Monica was coming. I didn't have to do this on my own. I ended the call and sat on the couch, trying to steady my breath. The apartment was still. Too still. The only sound was the gentle tap of rain against the window. I looked around, the familiar clutter of my home offering no comfort. The laundry was half folded, the empty mug on the counter a reminder of how disconnected I felt from everything. I was exhausted, physically and mentally. The emotional toll of the court case, of fighting a battle I never asked for, had drained me. But the thought of my children, my twins, kept me moving. They were growing inside me, small and fragile, and they needed me to be strong, even when I felt like I had nothing left. When Monica arrived, she didn't need me to say anything. She just gave me a steady look and a brief hug, and we sat down at the kitchen table. She didn't ask for details right away. Instead, she listened, really listened as I told her everything. I spoke of Daniel's manipulation, his veiled threats, the way he dismissed my concerns, the way he treated the pregnancy, like it was a bargaining chip in his game of control. I told her about the custody hearing, how his attorney had been smooth, confident, and mocking, how my own lawyer had folded under the pressure, unable or unwilling to stand up to them. When I reached the part about the elderly woman outside the clinic, Monica's expression shifted. She didn't interrupt. She didn't dismiss it as some delusion. Instead, she listened, her brow furrowing slightly as I recounted the strange certainty in the woman's words. You're not imagining this, Hannah, she said quietly once I finished. If the judge was compromised, it explains a lot. But this isn't something I can just look into casually. It's bigger than that. I know. I whispered, the weight of it all crashing down again. But I need to know. I need to know what happened, why this happened. Monica took a deep breath, her eyes sharpening. I can help you, but we'll have to be careful. If we go after the judge, we have to have solid evidence. I'll dig into it, see what I can find. But you need to prepare yourself. This could get messy. I'm ready, I said, though my voice faltered slightly. I wasn't sure I was ready. But I didn't have a choice. Monica squeezed my hand, her gaze steady. Then we'll do this, right? I'll get to work. You need to rest. We'll take it one step at a time. I nodded, a flicker of hope stirring inside me. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely powerless. Maybe I had a chance. And for the first time in days, I allowed myself to believe it. Monica left after a while, and I sat there for a long time, staring at the rain outside. I didn't know where this would go, but for the first time, I felt a small spark of determination. I had something to fight for now. My children, my future, and maybe even the truth. I couldn't let it all slip away. Not without a fight. I had barely slept. And the phone call with Monica had left me more unsettled than before. She was determined to help, but I wasn't sure how much help anyone could offer now. The feeling of being trapped had grown stronger with each passing hour, each second that I spent in this limbo between hope and despair. I hadn't left the apartment all morning. The world outside felt distant, the rain still drizzling down, casting everything in a gray, muted light. I hadn't moved much since Monica left, just sat there, staring at the walls, my mind replaying everything over and over again, The trial, the ruling, Daniel's smug face. The helplessness I had felt in that courtroom. Every time I tried to focus on something else, it all came rushing back. It was midday when the phone buzzed. Monica's name flashed on the screen, and my stomach twisted. Was this good news? Bad news? I didn't know what to expect, but I picked up the phone anyway. Hannah. Monica's voice was steady but had an edge of urgency to it. "Yeah, I'm here," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "What did you find?" There was a brief pause, and I could hear the sound of papers rustling in the background. "I've been digging into Judge Briggs," she said. "And I'm finding things. Financial things. He's linked to some developers, people who are involved in your husband's business. It's not enough yet to make a real case, but the connections are there. A pattern is starting to emerge." I sat up straight, my heart pounding. "What kind of pattern?" "Nothing solid, but there's something off." Monica continued, her voice quiet, almost conspiratorial. "The judge has been involved in rulings that benefit certain people. People who are tied to Whitmore Development." I felt a cold wave wash over me. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Whitmore Development. Daniel's company. My husband. My chest tightened, and I had to steady my breathing. Monica was still talking, but I couldn't focus on her words. I was too caught up in the sudden surge of anger and disbelief. How deep did this go? How long had this been going on? "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice shaky. "What's the next step?" There was a brief pause. "I'm going to keep digging," Monica said, "but I need you to be careful. This isn't something I can just handle casually. It's a bigger problem than I thought." I swallowed hard. The idea of Daniel being involved in something so insidious, it made my stomach turn. But I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't let it go. If there was even a chance that everything was as corrupt as it seemed, I had to fight. For my children. "I understand," I said, my voice firmer now. "Just keep me posted. Let me know what you find. We can't stop now." "I won't stop," Monica assured me. "I'll be in touch soon. And Hannah, we'll get through this. I won't let them get away with it." I ended the call, and for the first time in days, a strange sense of purpose began to take root in my chest. The anger that had been building inside me finally had a direction. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The rain outside continued, tapping softly against the window, but I could feel the shift inside me. I wasn't just a victim of this system anymore. I wasn't just waiting for the storm to swallow me whole. I was ready to fight back. I stood up and paced the room, trying to think through everything. If the judge was compromised, if Daniel had manipulated the court to get what he wanted, then this case wasn't just about custody. It was about corruption. About everything I had trusted being destroyed. And I wasn't going to let that stand. There was still so much I didn't know, so many pieces I needed to put together. But at least now, I had a plan. And I wasn't going to stop until I had answers. The sound of the doorbell broke through my thoughts. I froze. It was too early for anyone to be visiting. My heart skipped. Could it be Daniel? Could he have somehow found out about Monica's investigation? I hesitated, my pulse quickening. The last time I saw him, he had made it clear that he had no intention of letting me go easily. I moved slowly toward the door, trying to steady my breathing. My hand hovered over the knob, but before I could turn it, I heard the soft sound of a familiar voice. "Hannah." I breathed a sigh of relief, realizing it was only Monica. She had said she would stop by, but hearing her voice outside the door made my nerves spike. I opened the door, and she stepped inside, her face set with determination. She didn't waste any time. "I've got more information," she said. "I think we can take the next step." I nodded, my stomach still twisted with anxiety, but there was no turning back now. Whatever it took, I was going to fight for the truth. For my children, and for myself. The rain was still falling outside, but in that moment, I felt like I was no longer standing alone in the storm. I sat at the kitchen table, my phone still in my hand, the call with Monica replaying in my mind. She had given me hope, something I hadn't felt in days, maybe weeks. But now, that hope felt fragile, like it might slip away as easily as it had come. She was going to dig deeper. but I couldn't help but feel like I was running out of time. The apartment felt quieter than usual, the sound of the rain against the window, the only thing breaking the silence. I stared at the empty mug on the counter, a remnant of the morning I had tried to ignore. Every corner of the room felt cold, hollow, and it was as if the space itself was closing in around me. The weight of everything pressing down on me. The court case, Daniel's betrayal, the fear that kept me awake at night, felt almost unbearable. My mind kept drifting back to the trial, to the moment when the judge had made his ruling. Daniel had won, just like he always seemed to. And I had lost. Even before I stepped into the courtroom, I stood up, pacing the room, trying to push back the thoughts that were threatening to drown me. I hadn't even been able to look at the legal documents, the ones that had been mailed to me with the official ruling. I knew what they said. I didn't need to read them to understand. The words burned in my chest, making it hard to breathe, making everything inside me ache with a kind of helpless rage. And then there was the strange encounter outside the clinic. The old woman's words had stayed with me long after she disappeared into the rain. Someone paid him, she had said, about Judge Briggs. It felt insane to think that my entire life, my children's future, could be wrapped up in some kind of conspiracy. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it made a twisted kind of sense. How else could I explain the way everything had fallen apart? How else could I explain the decisions that had been made so swiftly, so deliberately against me? I ran my hand through my hair, frustration rising within me. What was I supposed to do with this new information? Monica had given me something to hold on to, but it wasn't enough. I needed something concrete. I needed a plan. My children needed a future that didn't involve Daniel's control or the corrupt hands that had helped him get what he wanted. I couldn't just sit here and wait. I pulled out my phone again and stared at the screen. I could call Monica. I could wait for her to find more answers. But I wasn't sure I could wait anymore. I needed to act. The thought of going back to the court, of facing Daniel, of facing everything that had led me here, it terrified me. But I had no other choice. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. It was time to take control. There was a knock at the door, a sharp sound that jolted me from my thoughts. I hesitated for a moment before walking toward it, my pulse quickening. Could it be Monica, already here? Or was it Daniel, coming to make sure I knew he was still in control? I opened the door slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. When I saw who was standing on the other side, I froze for a moment, unsure if I was seeing things clearly. Standing there was Sarah, my childhood friend. I hadn't seen her in years, but there she was, looking just as she always had. Her brown eyes were full of concern, and there was a softness in her expression that made the familiar ache in my chest feel sharper. Sarah and I had drifted apart over the years, each of us following our own paths, but seeing her now felt like a breath of fresh air. She wasn't part of the mess I had gotten myself tangled in, and yet she was here, standing in front of me like a lifeline. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I heard about the trial," she said quietly, stepping inside as I moved aside. "I wanted to check on you. I didn't think you'd want to talk to anyone, but I couldn't just." She trailed off, her gaze softening. "You don't have to go through this alone." I blinked, surprised by the sincerity in her words. "I didn't think you'd care." She shook her head, a small, almost sad smile on her lips. "Of course, I care. We may not talk much anymore, but I'm still your friend, Hannah. I know what this is doing to you, and I'm here. Whatever you need." I felt a lump form in my throat. It had been so long since I'd allowed myself to accept help. So long since I had allowed anyone to see the vulnerability that I'd buried deep inside me. But in that moment, with Sarah standing there, I realized how much I needed someone who could see me, not as a failure, not as a victim, but as a person who had been through hell and was still trying to fight her way out. "Thank you," I whispered. "I'm not sure what to do next. I'm so lost." "You're not lost," Sarah said, her voice firm. "You've been strong enough to get this far, and I'm not going to let you give up now." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. A reminder that I wasn't as alone as I thought. That there were people in my life who still cared. I have a plan, I said after a long pause. I'm going to fight back. I'm not going to let them win. Sarah nodded, her expression unwavering. Then let's fight together. Her words echoed in my mind as I led her into the living room. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't walking this path alone. Maybe there was still hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn things around. The next few days passed in a haze. Monica had kept her word, digging deeper into Judge Briggs' financial records, and the results were unsettling. She called me once, telling me that she had found discrepancies in his rulings, a series of decisions that seemed to favor certain developers, including a few connected to Daniel's business. It wasn't enough to build a case just yet, but it was more than I had ever hoped for. Still, the knowledge that I might have the upper hand didn't bring me peace. Every phone call, every email felt like a countdown to something I wasn't ready for. By the time I met Monica again, I was barely holding it together. The stress was eating away at me, gnawing at my insides. Every night was a restless blur of thoughts, of everything I'd lost, of everything that was slipping out of my grasp. I couldn't stop thinking about my children, about how they would grow up in a world that had already been so unfair to them. And I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel, about how he had manipulated everything around him to get what he wanted. Every move he made, every word he said, seemed calculated to control me, to break me down. Monica met me at a small cafe, her eyes sharp with purpose. I could see it in the way she carried herself, the quiet confidence that had always been there, even when life had pushed us in different directions. She looked like the person I needed right now, the person who could help me stand up against everything that had happened. I just wasn't sure I had the strength to do it on my own. Here's what I found, Monica said, sliding a manila folder across the table toward me. I've been tracking the judge's rulings, and the pattern is undeniable. There's financial backing from developers, tied to Daniel's company in several of his cases. I can't prove the bribe yet, but this is something we can use. I looked at the folder in front of me. The weight of the papers felt heavy, like they were holding all of my hopes and fears. Monica was right, it was a start. But it wasn't enough. We needed more. We needed something that would shake the system to its core. How do we go about proving it? I asked, my voice steady despite the panic rising inside me. I'm going to speak with a few contacts, Monica said, her eyes narrowing in thought. I've already sent some of the records to a financial analyst. They're going to cross-reference the transactions with Daniel's business. If there's something to find, they'll dig it up. I nodded, but the unease in my chest didn't go away. I was so close, yet it felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure of whether or not I could jump. Monica leaned forward, her voice quieter now. Hannah, I know this feels like you're up against an entire system. But you're not alone in this. You've got people on your side now. And we're not backing down. I tried to smile, but it didn't quite reach my eyes. Thank you, I whispered, my voice breaking slightly. It wasn't enough to make me believe it yet, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like there's a glimmer of hope. A possibility that I could win. Monica stood up, her expression determined. I'll be in touch, she said. You take care of yourself. We'll handle the rest. I watched her walk away, her figure disappearing into the bustling city streets, and I felt the heavy weight of responsibility settle over me again. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for my children, for everything they deserved to have a future without fear, without manipulation. A future where they could grow up free. The rain began to fall harder as I made my way back to my apartment. The city felt like a blur, the streets slick with water, the world outside muted by the pounding of the storm. But even as the darkness pressed in on me, I couldn't stop thinking about the moment I had left behind, about the strength that had stirred in me when Monica had spoken. Maybe I didn't have all the answers yet, but I was starting to believe that I could find them. Back at home, I sat in the silence, letting the day's events wash over me. The apartment felt empty without Monica's presence, but something had changed. I could feel it deep inside me. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. I wasn't going to back down. Not anymore. The next few days were a blur of waiting. The rain never stopped, falling steadily over Portland, as though the city itself was holding its breath. Monica had promised she would get answers. And she did slowly, methodically. Each phone call, each new piece of information she shared with me, only deepened the web of corruption I was beginning to unravel. But with each revelation, I felt the weight of the battle ahead. Monica had found links between Judge Briggs and several high-end developers, the same ones Daniel was connected to through his business. Nothing solid enough to prove bribery yet. But the pieces were starting to fall into place. And I couldn't ignore what the old woman had said. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like it was all connected. I hadn't told anyone else about her warning. The idea of it sounded insane, even to me. Who was she? Why did she know what I had only dared to suspect? But the feeling didn't go away. I couldn't shake the thought that the people involved in my life, the ones who had always been in control, had manipulated everything. And now, with Monica's help, I might actually be able to prove it. But the fear never left me. The fear that if I pushed too hard, it would all collapse. That my children would be taken away from me, that my life would fall apart in ways I couldn't foresee. It was easy to feel overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. I spent my nights tossing and turning, my mind unable to settle, replaying every moment of the trial, every way I had failed to protect myself, every way I had let Daniel control me. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. It was late one evening when Monica called again. I was sitting on the couch, my phone still in my hand from the last time I had spoken to her. The rain was louder now, tapping on the windows in a rhythm that matched my anxious heartbeat. "Hannah," she said, her voice firm but filled with urgency. "I've got something. It's not enough to go public with yet, but I think you need to hear it." I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. "What is it?" "There's a pattern," she said, her words crisp, calculated. "It's not just Briggs. There's been irregularities in his rulings over the last few years, decisions that benefit Daniel and certain other developers. I'm still getting the full picture. But there's enough to make me think. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes than we thought." I closed my eyes, processing her words. The pieces were finally starting to fit together. "What are we going to do about it?" "I've got a contact who works with a legal team specializing in judicial misconduct. They can start looking into this properly, but I need your permission to go public with some of what we have so far. It could be dangerous, Hannah. You have to know that." I felt a surge of fear. The last thing I wanted was to endanger my children or myself further. But I couldn't back down now. This was it. I had to fight. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady despite the nerves that gripped my stomach. "Let's do this." Monica's relief was audible, though she quickly masked it with determination. "All right, I'll set things in motion. But listen, you need to stay calm. Keep your head down. It's gonna get messy." I nodded, even though I knew she couldn't see me. "I can handle it." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, the weight of everything pressing on me. The rain outside seemed endless, and yet, in some strange way, it was comforting. The world felt quiet and distant, as though I were standing on the edge of something new. I didn't know what that something was, but I knew that it would change everything. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. I grabbed it quickly, my heart skipping a beat when I saw Monica's name on the screen. "Everything's moving faster than I thought," she said, her voice low. "I've just spoken to someone who's willing to help us dig deeper into the financial side. They're going to trace some of the transactions from Daniel's company, see if there are connections we can use." I didn't respond right away, trying to absorb what she was saying. "How long do you think it will take?" "It won't be quick," she replied. "But we've got enough to start applying pressure. The more we push, the more they'll crack." I swallowed, the weight of her words sinking in. The more we push, I quack. It felt like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't quite understand, but I knew I couldn't pull back now. "We'll do whatever it takes," I said, the determination in my voice matching her own. "Just keep me updated." I hung up, then sat there, trying to shake the tightness in my chest. I didn't know how this would end. I didn't even know if I could win. But for the first time in months, I felt something other than fear, a sense of control, however small, however fragile. The storm raged outside, but inside, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was beginning to fight back. The next few days felt like they were stretching on forever, but also slipping by too quickly. I barely slept, my mind constantly racing with everything Monica had told me, everything I still needed to do. There were moments when I felt like I was holding onto a thread, just barely keeping it together. But then there were moments when I felt the spark of something like hope, small but persistent. I hadn't spoken to Daniel since that day in court. Every time I thought about him, about his smug expression when the judge had ruled in his favor, my stomach turned. The memory of his voice, so calm, so certain of his power over me, made my hands shake. But now, as I walked through the quiet, rain-slicked streets of Portland, I felt something else, a growing sense of determination. It wasn't just about the case anymore. It wasn't just about custody of my children. This had become something bigger than that. This was about standing up for myself, for the first time in years. I wasn't going to let him win. I wasn't going to let the corruption, that had taken so much from me, go unchecked. I was on my way to meet Monica again, and as I approached the cafe, I couldn't help but notice the way the city felt different today. The rain had let up, and the streets, though still wet, were beginning to dry. The air was cool and fresh, and the city, which had seemed so cold and distant just days ago, felt alive again. I walked into the cafe, where Monica was already sitting at a corner table, a pile of papers in front of her. She looked up as I approached, her expression serious, but there was something else there too. Something softer, a recognition that we were moving into dangerous territory. "I've been digging deeper," she said, her voice low but steady. "There's more evidence, but it's still not enough to make a real case. We need more time." I sat down across from her, my heart pounding in my chest. "I don't have time," I said, my voice strained. "I can't just wait. We need to do something now. He's already gotten away with so much. If we wait any longer, he'll bury us." Monica leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping rhythmically against the table. "I get it, but rushing into this could make things worse. You're playing a long game here, Hannah. It's not just about winning the custody case anymore, it's about exposing the truth." The weight of her words sank in. I wanted to rush ahead, to confront Daniel, to confront Judge Briggs, but Monica was right. This was bigger than just me. This was about exposing a system that had been manipulated for too long. "What do we need to do next?" I asked, my voice softer now, the edge of panic fading as I tried to focus. "I've got a contact with the Oregon State Police. They specialize in financial crimes," Monica said, her eyes narrowing with purpose. "They're going to help us dig into the financial connections. But we need to be careful. The more we expose, the more people will come after us." I nodded, swallowing hard. I knew she was right. There was no going back now. Whatever happened next, I had to see it through. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady despite the fear creeping up my spine. "Let's do this." Monica smiled faintly. "Good. We'll take it step by step, but we need to keep it quiet for now. No more slip-ups. You've been under enough pressure already." I took a deep breath, letting her words settle. The next steps felt like a storm gathering on the horizon, inevitable, powerful, and terrifying. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had a purpose now, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. "Thank you, Monica," I said quietly, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "For everything." "Don't thank me yet," she replied with a wry smile. "We're just getting started." As we talked through the next steps, I felt a sense of calm beginning to take over. There was a long road ahead, filled with obstacles, but for the first time in months, I wasn't walking it alone. With Monica by my side, and the possibility of real justice on the horizon, I felt like I was finally reclaiming my life. We finished our coffee, and I stood up, feeling a quiet strength in my bones. The battle wasn't over, but it was about to begin in earnest. And this time, I wasn't backing down.